a nonprofit that I started, which is called Black Academics, which is a nonprofit that I started to spread and really disseminate these types of educational opportunities, as well as we're now creating a curriculum um, to be launched throughout various school districts around the country. So please check out that page, the Black Academics page. And, if you know organizations that we might be able to partner with in terms of philanthropic efforts, those that can potentially donate funds for the work that we're doing, that would be great. If you yourself could make a donation, that would also be great. And then the other page that I'm going to share is the Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness video course series that I produced about a year and a half ago now, I would say. And it launched in conjunction with my last book, Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness. Um, it's for people who may not have the time to read or may not be prone to reading. It's still an educational experience that people can tap into through a video course series where they're looking at us discuss a lot of the topics that were introduced in my last book, Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness, along with some reflection surveys that they can take as an addition or as a reflective exercise once they watch the video course series. So there's a survey at the end of each video course series. So I would ask you, please spread the word on that. And that said, I am going to jump in. I'm truly excited to see all of you who are here. I think this is amazing that we can gather on a Sunday night to be able to do this. Thank you for joining me for what is kind of a pre-webinar launch, a pre-launch webinar about my newest book, The Psychopathy of Whiteness, The Epigenetics of Anti-Blackness, Malignant Narcissism, and Collective Diabolical Antisocial Personality Disorder. I would not be here tonight, and I feel it very necessary for me to recognize the works of many of the philosophers that inspired me. One being Dr. Frantz Fanon in his book, Black Skin, White Masks. His other book as well, The Wretched of the Earth. Both of these books just kind of framed for me the impacts of colonization, but also the function of it and what it is meant to do. And he used diagnostic frameworks to do so. And these books and his writings really shaped my work, as you will see once you access my book, The Psychopathy of Whiteness. Another philosopher, Dr. E. Franklin Frazier, and his work around the Black bourgeoisie. He was a Black sociologist that's really studied the impacts of Eurocentric colonization in the lives of Black people, Black men, women, children, and the Black familial structure. So this was very instrumental in my writings early on, as well as this current book. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing is another one in her color confrontation theory and her framework, the framework that she introduced around it. Dr. Alvin Poussant in his book, Why Blacks Kill Blacks, and really dissecting and looking at the effects of what some people refer to as Black on Black crime being the result of white on Black crime, and how our behavioral patterns of violence, the ways that we may behave toward each other, is all built toward in the ways that white people have behaved toward us. And so we act that out as a byproduct. Dr. Bobby Wright and his work around the psychopathic racial personality, which I'll share some framing about, or as it relates to my work. I'm going to use some of his framing tonight, even as we're going through. I'm actually using the framing of all of these people, but I'll be quoting from him in particular, and Dr. Welsing. Dr. Amos Wilson, his book, The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy. His other book, which I have somewhere here, it's like the psychodynamics of anti-Blackness, really, or white supremacy. Um, and then Dr. Jerome E. Fox, in his workbook, Addicted to White. This was a very reflective workbook for me, and it really helped me in real time, in a very modern way, unpack the effects of Eurocentricity, whiteness and white supremacy, and the influence in not only my life, but the life of the Black community, as well as other colonized peoples who exist under the structure of white institutions and white culture, American culture. And so in my first book, the 400-Year Holocaust, I felt like that was more of a cathartic, emotional exercise where I was just traumatized about so much of the information that I had found, and I wanted to get it out. And so that was my first attempt in writing. And then my second book, which I kind of framed the second edition of the 400-Year Holocaust, which was kind of a beefier version of the first book, Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness, White Psychopathology, Collective Psychosis and Trauma in America. I went a tad bit deeper in this book, and I started to look at these dynamics through the diagnostic frameworks provided by the folks that I just named. And in this book, I am using their frameworks to really reframe history, but also the sociocultural and psychosocial dynamics that we find ourselves in this current day. So historically into the present. So it starts really in the 15th century, and I'll share briefly just some of the chapters in this book. I do start early on looking at the Catholic Church and the way that the Catholic Church engineered what were called the Papist Bulls that constituted that Catholics and then Christians could go out and conquer the world and really dominate the world and really act out genocide onto people who they deemed non-human or subhuman. So here is just kind of a chapter layout of the book. I'm actually going to the book, not to give too much away. But chapter 1 is, well, I'll go back. So I start with another letter to Black people, as I did in Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness. There is a foreword by Dr. Robin DiAngelo. I do enter kind of the threats that I received as a result of giving a lecture that I gave last year. I think that was last year, or it may have been the year before. I think it was 2024. And then there is a very detailed section where I lay out a variety of key concepts and definitions, some of which I'll be sharing with you tonight. And then there are some reflections that I share. I talk about the Black identity crisis, and then there's the introduction, and then chapter 1, the American delusion, chapter 2, the theology of conquest, chapter 3, where I'm talking about really the religious aspects of white supremacy and how those Papist bulls then led to Christian domination and Christian, what became really European Christian nationalism, which then transformed into white Christian nationalism. And then chapter 3, the legal invention of whiteness. Chapter 4, the gospel of violation. Chapter 5, white rage, clinical reality. Chapter 6, whiteness as disorder. Chapter 7, inherited violence. Chapter 8, the scientific religion of white power. Chapter 9, the psychodynamics of whiteness and the legal codification of terror. Chapter 10, white malignant, diabolical, psychopathic institutional repression. Chapter 11, the continuum of enslavement. Chapter 12, the post-George Floyd era. Chapter 13, from colonial faith to civic religion. Chapter 14, the neuroscience of whiteness. And chapter 15, where do we go from here? So I'm going to start us off tonight with a clip of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing talking about her work. And this will take us back to roughly 1975. And then I'm going to elaborate a bit on her conceptual framework, and then that'll lead us into some examples. And I hope to get to some questions toward the end, okay? So here we go. Hey, Rochelle. Great to see you. Hey, Rick.
What's up, Dante?
Here we go.
Mr. Prince has the first question.
Yes, Dr. Welsing, it's been about a year ago since you were dismissed from Howard University, and at the time I recall you charged that your crest theory, which in brief holds that whites are inferior to blacks because of the lack of melanin, was responsible for that dismissal. And I'm wondering whether you still believe that and what proof you have of that.
Well, Dick, I do believe it. I was dismissed from Howard, fired from Howard in June 1975. In November 1974, while still at Howard, I heard a rumor that I was going to be blocked from promotion and tenure because of my views, not because of my academic work. And I went immediately to the Dean of the College of Medicine, Dr. Marion Mann, and I asked him, I said, Dr. Mann, I hear that I am going to be blocked from promotion and tenure because of my views. And Dr. Mann responded, to be frank with you, Dr. Welsing, this paper that you wrote, and I said, the crest theory of color confrontation, he said yes. He went on to say that it did not make sense for me to say that white people were envious of black people because white people lack skin pigmentation. And we went on from that point. But let me make one correction. My theory does not say that whites are inferior to blacks. I don't say that. I say that whites feel that they are inferior because they cannot produce skin pigmentation and because their status as, I say, a variant of albinism is genetic recessive to blacks, and they can be genetically annihilated by non-white people, that this is what causes that sense of inadequacy, that they have built a total behavioral system that is a compensation. White supremacy is a compensation for a sense of white genetic inadequacy.
I see. One other follow-up on that, and that is, what background in genetics do you have to enable you to document that theory?
Well, I'm a medical doctor, and all medical doctors receive or take courses in genetics, and this is very, very basic genetics, and it not only is very basic genetics, this is common lay knowledge, and we hear it, the dominance, the genetic dominance of black over white is heard in the expression, one drop of black blood makes you black. In other words, if you were to relate to a white female, the product of that relationship would be an individual that is identifiable as what is called non-white. They would have something, I mean, the curliness of the hair, the darkness of the skin would make the child look more like you than like the mother.
I see.
Dr. Welsing, your theory to me seems to infer some innate behavior on the part of a human being because they are, quote, black or white. Would you agree or disagree that the terms black and white are not genetic definitions? And if they are not genetic definitions, then how could your theory be true?
Well, wait a minute. When you say genetic definitions, I'm not quite sure what you say, but for the sake of time, the factors that determine whether we're going to have skin pigmentation or whether we lack skin pigmentation is based on genes. In other words, you have genes that determine the quantity of melanin pigment that is going to be produced in your skin, in your eyes, in your hair. If you have a gene, a mutation towards an inability to produce that pigment, that is also genetically determined. And that is at least within the context of the Western world, or the white supremacy culture, the dominant classification of people, not as determined by Francis Welsing, but as determined by white people themselves, is your classification. Either you are white or you are classified as non-white. This is on your birth certificate. This is on every paper of identification that you have. And this focus on skin coloration, I maintain, is based on the awareness on the people who are now in power that they are a minority. The white group represents a minority in the world population. And the color focus is something that is a psychological, I say a psychological necessity based on a genetic reality. So I don't know.
Okay. How many of you heard that? A psychological necessity based on a genetic reality. And so white people have attached in their psychology to this idea or color concept that they indeed are white, when the reality is that scientifically they are incapable of producing large quantities of melanin, which does not equal that they are white. But in European culture, particularly English culture, and some other cultures as well, what the color white represented was things that were pure, close to God, etc. And so you've got a conglomerate of European people coming together for psychopolitical purposes to form a conglomerate that is a juxtaposition toward a group of people that they are calling Negro, which means black, right? And so it's a political cult of sorts, if that makes sense. Hey, Kim McLean, it's great to see you. What I begin to understand when I looked at, and I'll show her conceptual framework, and I'm going to share some examples of exactly what she's saying, because as I went and relooked at and started to re-examine my research and the evidence that I had found, just kind of evidencing what she is saying, I became mind blown because I'm like, oh my God, what she's saying is actually true. And you hear this being repeated over and over and over and over again by white people. So I'm going to share some historical examples, and I'm going to share some recent examples. So in her, she says it's white supremacy is a psychogenetic it's a psychogenetic necessity based on a psychological necessity based on a genetic reality, that they can be genetically annihilated, and that this has in so many words really driven white people mad, so to speak, to the degree that they have launched a total compensatory logic system, white supremacy, to be able to dominate other people, colonize them, and dominate them in every area of our lives. And the areas of our lives, which she takes from Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., and she calls them the areas of people activity, are economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. It has infiltrated every area. And so that's what I'm going to share more today. So if you go back, for example, to 1664, in this act, in the colony of Maryland, this act made black men slaves. But what it also did, it says, and all children born of any Negro or other slave shall be slaves as their fathers were for the term of their lives. So it's stripping black men of all value and worth, but it's also making them unappealing. But it's criminalizing at the same time European women. It says, and for as much as diverse freeborn English women, forgetful of their free condition, and to the disgrace of our nation, marry Negro slaves, by which also diverse suits may arise. Notice that language. They're concerned about diverse suits arising, non-white people. And so they become psychologically preoccupied in a compulsive manner about the fact that non-white children will be produced. And so they criminalize the white women, and they basically say, if you marry these black men, you'll be enslaved for the life of your husband. In 1681 in Maryland, they do this, they repeat it, but they introduce the language white. So rather than just freeborn English, they're saying other white women, because prior to this, you had Eleanor Butler, who married a black man the month before. I think this law hit the book September of 1681. She married William Borman in August 1681. And so they're saying English or other white women. And this is when whiteness, either the first time or one of the first times, becomes a legal category of sorts. And they introduce another law similar to this in the Virginia colony in 1691. That one is much more explicit. I won't go through it. And then in 1705, here's another example. This one says, and for a further Christian care, oh, let me go back. So in the laws concerning marriage, a few things happened during this period. So the Virginia law not only deals with white women, but it also deals with white men. And it says that they cannot marry black women or anything. And what they also do is they start to criminalize ministers who are performing the marriages. So they're sending them to jail. The laws concerning indigenous people are a bit different because, again, it's based on colorism. And for as much as members of certain indigenous tribes were able to intermix or amalgamate with white people, and it produced a product that was of a hue that it was similar to that of a European person, they were fine with those marriages. So you don't see the same types of legal actions being taken where certain members of certain indigenous communities are concerned. If they if they were darker and or considered a mestizo, then yes, they had a concern with that because it would produce a brown baby. This law does a few things. So it says, and for a further Christian care and usage of all Christian servants, be it also enacted by the authority aforesaid, and it is hereby enacted that no Negroes, mulattoes, or Indians, although Christians or Jews, Moors, Mohammedans. So they're talking about Afro Jewish people because, and I want to frame this adequately. Jewish people were thought to have and did cohabitate with Moorish people in Spain for a period of almost 700 years, or maybe a little bit over. And so all of these indications that you see here of various identity categories are people who are assumed to be of African descent. So it says that no Negroes, mulattoes, Indians, although Christians or Jews, Moors, Mohammedans, or other infidels shall at any time purchase any Christian servant nor any other except of their own complexion. So, and I'm just going to stop this for just 1 second. How many of you see just by the use of that language, they're concerned about color, they're concerned about complexion, it's occupying their psychology. So I want you to, if you can, for those of you who can, just write a quick reflection in the chat based on what I've explained so far so that I can understand whether you're tracking with me or I need to kind of slow down. So if you can write just kind of your thoughts, I'll give you maybe a minute to do that in the chat. That would be great. What are you taking away or what's resonating with you so far based on what I've shared and kind of how I frame this discussion? And again, I want you to consider Dr. Cress-Welsing's framing that there's an awareness that they can be genetically annihilated, and that drives this kind of violence through militarism, through domination, destruction, etc. The constant fear, yes. And so within the framing of this particular law from 1705 from the Virginia colony, they say that if, you know, a brown person or a black person of African descent purchases a white servant, then that white servant shall be made free by this law. The contract will be null and void. They do not want white servants, whether male or female, around black or brown people, so to speak. And if any person having such Christian servants, so if you are a white man or if you are a white woman and you have a white servant working for you, indentured servants, if you intermarry with any such Negro, mulatto, or Indian, Jew, Moor, Mohammedan, or other infidel, every Christian white servant that you have working for you on your plantation shall ipso facto become free if you marry any one of them. Okay, so they're creating, how many of you can see, a form of segregation to ensure that the white race remains not only just separate and segregated, but pure, that there is no possibility of that type of genetic annihilation taking place. Another example historical example. This is in the mid 18th century, and this is the South Carolina, the Negro Act of South Carolina, 1740. Section 1 declares all Negroes and Indians to be slaves. Section 2, under this provision, it has been uniformly held that color is prima facie evidence that the party bearing the color of a Negro, mulatto, or mestizo is a slave, but the same prima facie result does not follow from the Indian color. So if you are of the Indian color and that color is thought to be in proximity to the color of white Europeans, then you are exempted from the category of a slave, of an enslaved person. But if you look as though you have any mixture of African descent, mulatto, mestizo, you're a brown person, or you're just an all-out Negro, then you are to be a slave. And so how many of you see this continual emphasis on color, complexion, the use of color concepts to segregate people? And so I want to ask you another question. How is it working psychologically? What is it driving? Because in my estimation, when I looked at this, I said, wow, this is emblematic of people who are schizophrenic and very paranoid. It's driving a paranoia. Would anyone like to respond to that? I'll ask maybe one person. Danicia, hey there.
Hi, Dante.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I was just gonna write, what is very interesting is the lack of understanding and the connection to creating children with slaves. So it's almost as if white folks were having like out-of-body experiences. Like they talk about aliens now, but the aliens were truly them, because I'm going to separate my whiteness, even though I am raping these slave women, producing children, and enslaving them. I am separating myself completely from them. And that to me rings of a psychological disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. It's psychopathological for sure. And that's what I also scale out in my book as well, because you're not separating yourself from the physical act. You're engaging in the violence, you're committing it, you're doing it, but then you're in denial about it, and you're projecting that, oh, these women are making me do this, these men are making me do this, oh, these young girls and these young boys are making me commit sexual assault and sodomize them. So it's a process of dissociation. It's a process of projection always, which I'm going to get into. And so when you look at the psychological development of whiteness and the fact that the United States of America was founded on the premise that only a free white person, right? So again, we know that whiteness is not real, but only those that we deem that look and meet our prima facie definition of what a white person is can be admitted to the United States of America. And so Dr. Cress-Welsing, she says, white supremacy is a power system dynamic, structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined. It consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thoughts, speech, actions, and emotional response infused simultaneously into all areas of people activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. White supremacy's ultimate purpose is to ensure white genetic survival and prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth. And so you have presidents, for example, like Thomas Jefferson. I've shared this example many times. He says that I advance it, therefore, as a suspicion only that the blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the whites in the endowments, both of body and mind. And so what you see within this one example, as well as the examples, the legal examples that I shared, are what these theorists and what I have defined as white projectionism in my book. A core psychocognitive defense mechanism of whiteness. It is the compulsive need to externalize one's own guilt, violence, and pathology onto racialized others, thereby preserving the illusion of moral purity. Rooted in white paranoia and fear of accountability, white projection functions as the primary coping mechanism of the white ego. The very traits white society most represses, aggression, deceit, sexual deviance, moral instability, are attributed to Black and non-white peoples. Clinically, it reflects projective identification. The disowned aspects of the white psyche are assigned to others who are then punished for embodying them. This recursive delusion allows whiteness to maintain its innocence while perpetuating harm, rendering the aggressor perpetually victimized by those it oppresses. He also says that Black people secrete less by the kidneys and more by the glands of the skin. Again, none of this being a statement of fact, but being a statement of his cognitive distortion. This is all rooted in a distorted perception. President Abraham Lincoln, I will say then that I am not nor ever have been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and Black races. He understands that it's something that is structured into society and that white people have been situated on a pedestal, that they have been positioned by laws, by policies, by economic accessibility to be able to participate in society. He says he does not want to bring about that equality where Black people are concerned. And so within this statement is kind of, again, this need to oppress Black people. He says that I am not or ever have been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office. So it's a compensatory logic system that is a domination system, right? They have the ability to decide who can vote, who won't, and so on, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say in addition to this, that there's a physical difference. Again, Black people, or the idea of Blackness, occupying so much of his mindset. There's a physical difference between the white and Black races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. He's not just in favor of it, he is compulsively obsessed and concerned with it. That is what his statement, and that's true of all white people. President Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's successor, if Blacks were given the right to vote, that would place every slave-footed, bandy-shanked, humpback, thick-lipped, flat-nosed, woolly-headed, ebon-colored Negro in the country upon an equality with the poor white man. As long as I am president, this will be a country for white men and a government for white men. This is white supremacy. This is white psychopathology in action. I am concerned with about the survival of white people, this idea of whiteness and white people that I have conjured up in my head, and that is who I am fighting for. That is what is of most importance and value to me. President Richard Nixon, you have to face the facts. The whole problem is really the Blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this without appearing to. Again, it is an obsession. It's a psychopathological obsession. Donald Trump was reported to have said, I think that that guy is lazy, and it's probably not his fault because laziness is a trait in Blacks. It really is. I believe that. Trump also later acknowledged that, okay, so yeah. So anyway, again, the psychocultural aspects of this, that this mindset, this psychology has been so deeply embedded into the minds of European people. And again, none of it being a statement of truth or fact. It is rooted in their perceptions, their warped, their warped misperceptions of people of African descent and those that they call Black, have characterized as Black people. So Dr. Bobby Wright, in The Psychopathic Racial Personality, he analyzed the behavior of European Americans toward African Americans through the lens of psychopathy. He proposed that the historical and ongoing mistreatment of African Americans by European Americans is not simply a matter of prejudice or ignorance, but it is indicative of a deep-seated psychological condition. So some of the key characteristics, Dr. Wright argued that the defining traits of the psychopathic racial personality include an absence of empathy, a disregard for the humanity of others, deceitfulness, and a persistent pattern of exploiting and oppressing African Americans. He believed that these traits are manifested in institutionalized racism, systemic violence, and cultural domination. And so he says, in their relationship with the Black race, whites are psychopaths, and their behavior represents an underlying biologically transmitted proclivity with roots deep in their evolutionary history. The psychopath is an individual who is constantly in conflict with other persons or groups. He is unable to experience guilt, is completely selfish and callous, and has a total disregard for the rights of others. One of the best methods that can be used to measure the psychopathic traits of the white race is observing and analyzing their universal overt behaviors and attitudes towards Blacks. Psychopaths simply ignore the concept of right and wrong. By ignoring this trait in the white race, the lack of ethical and moral development Blacks have made and are still making a tragic mistake in basing the worldwide Black liberation movement on moral suasion. It is pathological for Blacks to keep attempting to use moral suasion on a people who have no morality where race is the variable. And so when you look at, for example, Charlie Kirk, he says, if I see a Black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. It begs the question when you see a Black pilot, you wonder, you say, I hope they are qualified. In the spirit of affirmative action, we have Ramon and Cadillac, who are your two pilots. They've never flown before, but they are Black. If I'm dealing with someone in customer service who is a moronic Black woman, is she there because of her excellence, or is she there because of affirmative action? Sheila Jackson Lee, Michelle Obama, Joy Reid, you don't really have the brain power to be taken seriously. So again, there's a projection. There is a psychopathological functionality where Black people and the idea of Blackness is occupying so much of his brain space in his life, so to speak, that he can only derive his own sense of self-worth and value by projecting. Not only that, he himself was, by white American educational standards, uneducated. He did not have a college degree. So I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on that in just a second. So white impression management, a conscious and subconscious behavioral mechanism by which white individuals and institutions manipulate perception to sustain psychic equilibrium and moral innocence. It is the performance of benevolence to mask the operations of domination, a social camouflage for the pathology of superiority. Clinically, it aligns with narcissistic image regulation and ego defense through projection. White impression management involves controlling historical narratives, editing facts, sanitizing violence, and manufacturing virtue through performative displays of empathy, charity, and progress. This process maintains white identity as morally superior and non-white existence as deviant or defective. It is not simply deceit. It is a collective cognitive distortion, an institutionalized delusion that sustains the psychopolitical fantasy of white righteousness. So I'm going to pause there and ask, does anyone have any thoughts? Okay, I'm going to move on for the sake of time. And so again, when you look at kind of this impression management, right, and what white people project to the world about themselves and to themselves about who they are, you see that it's not rooted in any type of factual analysis or truth as well, which is why you can have, for example, this guy, John Corcoran, who wrote an article that I featured in my first and second book. He says, I was a teacher for 17 years, but I couldn't read or write. So within the reality of whiteness and white supremacy, there's this projection that we are superior, but in real time, it does not account for white inadequacy and white mediocrity that really is the standard for whiteness, because you don't have to be good, you don't have to prove capability, you don't have to prove competence, and you are rewarded with countless opportunities because you are white. We see that from people like Pete Hegseth, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, who we saw appear before Congress earlier this week, Matt Gaetz, Tulsi Gabbard. And I love this post by Dwayne Buckingham. He said, I love the diversity within the incoming administration and feel like they will represent and fight for ethnic minorities. They understand and empathize with groups who have experienced social justice. All of them are highly qualified and earned their positions without alliance to Trump, power, privilege, and money, right? Hegseth told Senator he paid $50,000 to a woman who accused him of 2017 sex assault. So you can pay prostitutes, you can be an admitted, or you can be an accused sexual abuser, multiple women accusing him of rape. You can also be someone, the former Michigan Township Supervisor arrested in child sexting, resigns, then wins re-election in a landslide. So you can be a pedophile and still have the support of the collective white body politic. Trump Justice Department, Holman closed investigation into border chief for accepting a bag of cash. Jury finds Trump liable for sexual abuse. Awards accuser $5 million. You can become the president of the United States. You can be convicted of felony crimes of fraud and still, again, have the support of the collective white race. So they're within the function of impression management. It's not rooted in a reality, but it's rooted in a projection that we are moral, we are pure, we deserve. It's a compulsive entitlement. And yet there are really no interrogations into how this functions across and throughout our culture, as well as around the world. And let's be very clear, the white supremacy was accomplished through militarism and through white domination, not because these people were superior or their ancestors were superior. So white affirmative action, the legal and institutional codification of racial narcissism, it encompasses all laws, policies, and cultural norms designed to perpetuate white dominance, including property rights, policing, taxation, education, and employment systems. Clinically reframed, white affirmative action is the structural symptom of whiteness's dependency disorder, its inability to sustain self-worth without systemic preference and protection. It is the pathological insistence on entitlement, the belief that material and psychic comfort must always be secured at the expense of others. Through this mechanism, whiteness perpetuates a feedback loop of dependence, fear, and projection, the constant need to reaffirm superiority through institutional scaffolding. It is the architecture of delusional privilege built on collective psychopathy. I'd love for you to write your thoughts in the chat. What is this? What bells are beginning to ring for you? And while you're doing that, I'm also going to prepare some videos that I want to share with you as well. Okay. All right, I'm just going to share this video. This was the other day. Someone that Trump nominated appeared before Congress, and I want you to hear what he's saying, okay?
President Trump's nominee for a top position at the State Department faced bipartisan pushback yesterday during a confirmation hearing over previous comments he has made regarding the erasure of white culture. Jeremy Carl served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Interior during Trump's first term and is currently a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, a conservative think tank in Washington. He is Trump's pick for a position that involves implementing U.S. policy at the United Nations and other multilateral organizations. In one exchange, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut asked Carl to clarify previous statements regarding concerns over the erasure of white culture and identity.
So tell me the values that stitch together white identity and that make it different than black identity.
Senator, again, thank you for
spent a lot of time talking about this and writing about this.
Yeah, no.
Be able to, you're struggling with this, but you should be fairly easily, I would assume, able to tell us your thoughts on how white identity is different than other kinds of identity and how it's being erased.
Senator, again, thank you for the question. I'm just trying to be I'm just trying to be very precise. Because I'm here in front of a Senate committee, I would say that the white church is very different than the black church in terms of its tone and style on average. Foodways could often be different.
Yeah. And those
music could be different.
And those are being erased.
Music could be different. Well, if you look at the Super Bowl halftime show, which was not in English this year.
So our ability to access white churches or white food or white music is being erased?
Senator, again, thank you for the question. What I would say is the biggest thing, because actually, contrary to many of the comments that have been shown, racial nationalists have been very, very critical of my work because they correctly say that I'm actually, of course, not a racial nationalist, which I'm not. I'm a civic nationalist. I am concerned with the majority common American culture that we had for some time that through particularly mass immigration, I think has become much more balkanized, and I think that weakens us. And again, I'm not running away from that comment. I'm not apologizing for it.
Well, I'm way over my time. I think you're struggling to answer this question, right? Because underlying your beliefs is a sentiment that white culture is just simply better. That
no, Senator, I have to disagree with that.
But you haven't been able to really coherently answer any of my questions about how you define white culture, how you define the threat that's posed. I appreciate you being very honest that you believe that white Americans are subject to greater amounts of discrimination in this country than black Americans. I do not think that's a sentiment that is shared broadly on this committee. It is all what makes you just wildly, wildly unqualified to take this post. I'm well over my time. Thank you.
Well, Senator, I do appreciate you letting me actually respond. I genuinely do. So thank you.
Okay, so what stood out to you? And I'll ask for maybe two people to speak up. And I'll kick us off. How many of you could see that he was unable to really give any clear examples about the ideas about whiteness that he holds in his head? How many of you were able to see that by show of hands? But yet the idea is there. And again, there is an occupation of brain space that is driving this, that is completely psychotic, immensely dangerous. So yeah, two people. Are there two people that'd like to share thoughts?
Hey, Dante.
Hey, Angel.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Great to see you.
Good to see you. When I watched it, because I've watched it multiple times at this point, I'm really trying to listen to what he's trying to say. I think what frustrates me the most is that they really don't have an answer, but believe they have an answer. Like, do you know what I'm saying? And it made me think about, I don't know if y'all ever listen to Code Switch, it's a podcast, but they had a episode called The Folk Devil Made Me Do It. And what it talked about was moral panics and how throughout this time they've used these moral panics to make white people feel like they're going to lose something. And if you make people feel like they're going to lose something, you get them scared enough, then they're going to do whatever they can to pull people along. And that's what I see in this administration. I see that it's this fear that they keep on passing on. Okay, if we let, which he also said, if we let it become more of them than us, then it's going to be a problem.
That's right.
And that's what he was saying pretty much, was if it becomes more, we in trouble.
So to your point, there is a paranoia that is driving this, which has led to a psychosis, that this is what people believe that they need to do and how they need to function in order to sustain themselves. So within that frame, we're not all American. We are concerned with white Americans and this idea. And again, but it's also all based on sight. And what led me to this discovery that this is psychological more than anything else. It is just, it's a belief system. It is psychological, is that as long as white people perceive, let's say a very lighter skinned black person, as long as they perceive that person to be able to pass and to be white, they're fine. They can function with them. They can be admitted into their social circles. That's true for Hispanics that might appear white, as well as Asians that might appear white. They're fine. The moment that they begin to think or they find out that they are mixed with something or that they're Black, it sends off neuro it sends off neural waves, in their psyche where they begin to unravel, essentially. So I know I asked for two people, but I'm going to go on for the sake of time. So white psychopathy, in my book, I define it as the behavioral and affective engine of white supremacy. It represents the chronic compulsion of white people to assert dominance over Black and other non-white peoples as a means of affirming existence. Clinically, white psychopathy functions as a dependency disorder. The white psyche's self-worth depends upon the subjugation of others. Oppression becomes the psychic drug of the dominant class, necessary to sustain the illusion of control and coherence. This psychopathy expresses itself in law, medicine, religion, and education as the rational exercise of authority. Yet beneath these structures lies a shared neurotic core, the inability to experience humanity without hierarchy. The white subject's pleasure principle is rooted in domination. The sight of Black suffering reaffirms its sense of being. Thus, white psychopathy is not deviation, but doctrine, the emotional infrastructure of Western civilization. So Dr. Bobby Wright and Dr. Amos Wilson, also Dr. Cress Welsing, they talked about this as being neurobiological. So when we talk about white racism as neurobiological, we're pointing to the idea that racism is not just a belief system floating in the air. It is deeply wired into the brain and nervous system throughout social conditioning, learned behaviors, and stress responses. So conditioned neural pathways, racism operates like a form of neurobiological programming. Repeated exposure to racist narratives, stereotypes, and practices in schools, media, law, institutions ingrains neural circuits that automatically associate Black with danger, inferior, or less worthy. So this is hardwired in. So when we talk about this idea that, we just need different policies, that like those policies are the answer, or that they're going to change anything, that is not the case. And this is also, this psychology has been programmed into Black people. It's been programmed into Asian people, into people who are characterized and identified as Hispanic, where they too are socialized to serve white supremacy and to also perpetuate anti-Black and brownness, which is why you can have another Donald Trump administration, because there were roughly 54 to 56% of Latino men who voted for Donald Trump, as well as roughly 20 to 22% of Black men who voted for Donald Trump, and upwards of roughly almost 40% of Latino women who voted for Donald Trump. Okay? So when we get to the Epstein class, I want to spend a little time here and then get to a few more definitions and maybe have some group time as well. And we talk about people like Jeff Bezos, Prince Andrew, Ghislaine Maxwell, Howard Lutnick, Steve Bannon, Jeffrey Epstein himself, and Donald Trump. We're talking about something that has been functioning, a dynamic that has been functioning in throughout European culture for centuries. And so this picture is actually from the 1930s, where you had Mr. Charlie Johns, who was 22, who married Eunice. What's her last name? I forget her last name, but he married this young child. She was 9 years old. This is from the 1930s in America. So this 1275 Statute of Westminster, which I talk about in chapter 4 of my book, was a law that basically constituted child marriage. They set the age of marriage for young boys at 14, and for young girls it was 12. There was a consent provision in this law that stated that if a man ravished a maiden within age that is within the age of 12 years with her will or against her will, the ravisher shall have judgment of life or member. So they would either be sentenced to life, or they would be killed. But that's within the age of 12 years old. So above 12 years old, consummation of marriage or sex with someone 12 and older was permissible. And so you see that this law was effect from roughly 1275 over in England. And then when the English came over here and they set up royal charters and the colonialism over here, the institution of enslavement as we know it through the transatlantic slave trade, this law remained in effect through the 1600s, through the 1700s. And once the United States of America formed, by the year 1800, the age for consent for young girls was lowered roughly to age 10. And so betrothal and marriage, children could be betrothed, engaged at an even younger age with parental consent. Marriage was legally permissible at 12, as I just explained, but again, that age went down to 10. Parental consent, although 12 was the minimum legal age, the legal minimum, customary practice often involved parental approval, especially for very young brides. So you could marry someone as young as 7, 8, maybe even 6, if you had the permission and the consent of the parents. It was considered legally permissible for a man to consummate a marriage with a girl aged 12 or older. And when the United States of America formed, again, that age went down to 10. And in some instances, it went lower than that. Intercourse with a girl under 10, this was just under the 1275 Westminster statute, was considered rape under English law as codified in the Statute of Westminster, but it was not considered rape once the United States of America rolled around and began to lower these ages. So the persistence into U.S. law in the 18th century, so through the 1700s and into the 1800s. After American independence, most U.S. states retained English common law standards unless they specifically passed statutes modifying them. Throughout the 18th and early 19th centuries, the age of consent in most states remained between 10 and 12 years old. In some states, though, like Delaware, the age of consent was as low as 7 years old until the 19th century. Okay, so again, we see white psychopathy being acted out here. And then if you go to other texts, such as slave breeding, which I also quote in my text, they point to the fact that plantations relied on what they referred to as breeding wenches and plantation bucks, where they would require Black boys and men to rape Black girls and women. So this was the economy of the institution of slavery, especially when they outlawed they passed the International Slave Trade Act, which effectively banned slavery in the United States in 1808. And that's when they got about really breeding Black men and women and boys and girls. And so if you go to the slave narratives, which this book quotes from, and then I also quote from a series of slave narratives as well, where you see formerly enslaved people talking about how their parents were prized as fast breeders. Someone was saying that their parent received, Peter Brown, his mom gave birth to three sets of twins, right? And then this guy, Willie Blackwell, he talked about how, his father was seen as a big, powerful Black, man that the owners would basically lock him in rooms with young Black girls and Black women, usually the moistest is what he's saying here, to sire children with. So he would spend his time raping young girls and women as a result of being forced to be locked in a room with these individuals and force them to have sex with him. But again, the Black male and the Black female are being forced to do this because of the psychoeconomic goals of white culture, of the white institution of slavery. So it's psychoeconomic. There's a psychology behind this, and then there's the also economic benefit. Gonna go on. One enslaved woman from Louisiana described, master would make the men go into the girls he wanted them to breed with. Sometimes he stood right there. Sometimes he took his turn too. So she's talking about the white male forcing rape, but then also watching it and then sometimes joining in and performing gang rape. Lewis Hughes, in his book, 30 Years a Slave, he says, the master often sent the men to the women he wanted them to breed with. Some of the women cried all night, but they had no power to refuse. So how many of you are seeing that this is just pure evil at play? It goes beyond really our ability to define and comprehend, I would say. And so I'm doing my best to explain this through diagnostic language, because that's what really helped me to get a grasp on this. So Maddie Jackson, many were the women who were compelled to submit to the brutal passions of the overseers and masters. Some masters would make men go to certain women to raise children, same as they breed cattle. The woman had no say. Harriet Jacobs, in her book, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, she says, no matter whether the slave girl be as black, as ebony, or as fair as her mistress, in either case, there is no shadow of law to protect her from insult, from violence, or even from death. And when she says insult, she's talking about rape. The degradation, the wrongs, the vices that grow out of slavery are more than I can describe. And so when I looked at, for example, cases like R. Kelly, cases like P. Diddy, I'm looking at the behavior of Black men, which is something that's been trained into Black men when we see these types of offenses occurring, but they are patterned after white male behavior. And they have also been regulated by white male pathological behavior as well, once for economic profit and also political gain and functionality. But now it's just culture. It's culture. And so William Brown, in his narrative, he says, there was a woman on the plantation who made it her business to take the young colored boys to her room. And so you see repeated narratives like this by some of the men in their journals, in their narratives, about how white girls and women would molest and or rape Black men and boys, and they would force them to have sex with them. And in some cases, they would threaten them. They would threaten to have them murdered if they did not. And so President Thomas Jefferson, he says, I know no error more consuming to an estate than that of stocking farms with men almost exclusively. I consider a woman who brings a child every 2 years as more profitable than the best man on the farm. What she produces is in addition to the capital while his labors disappear in mere consumption. And so what he's talking about is if you stock your plantations with mostly young girls and women, you can have them raped. You can breed them, and they will breed the slaves that you need. It's not economically savvy to go out and purchase men to stock your farms with, because once they die, they're done. But if you get your hands on these young Black girls and Black women, you can breed them, and you can have them raped, and you can just reproduce as much labor as you need. So again, there's a psychological, political, and economic and entertainment aspect to all of what was happening there. When you see rape laws introduced within the context of the United States, they only refer to white women. Only white women are seen as those who are rapeable. And then they also don't even, in most states, they don't even criminalize rape committed by white men at all. And all of them pathologize and project that Black men or Black boys are prototypes for rapists. And so that's what you see in the entrance of all of these laws. In the Celia case, when I looked, for example, at what came down from Judge William Augustus Hall in the instruction that he gave to the jury when she killed her rapist, Robert Newsom, who she had fathered roughly 3 children by. She was pregnant with the 3rd when she killed him. But the judge basically said in this case, if Newsom was in the habit of having intercourse with the defendant who was his slave and went to her cabin on the night he was killed to have intercourse with her or for any other purpose, and while standing in the floor talking to her, she struck him with a stick, which was a dangerous weapon, and knocked him down, and struck him again after he fell and killed him by either blow. It is murder in the first degree. So she should not have been defending herself, because if he was in the habit of raping her and he had been doing it, she needed to submit. So how many of you can see the connections in terms of what's happening right now with this kind of worldwide pedophile ring that's being discovered, I guess, for the first time, but that this has been at play and ongoing for centuries? By show of hands. Okay. I'm going to, again, and you see this pathology further actualized and realized through various rulings. This is the Mississippi Supreme Court in 1859. They considered whether the violation and the rape of a 9-year-old girl by an enslaved black male was actually rape. And what they decided was that it was not rape because rape could only be committed by or on the person, on the body of a white woman. And so within this ruling, there are several things happening here that just kind of jumped out at me. They say the crime of rape does not exist in this state between African slaves. Our laws recognize no marital status as between slaves. Their sexual intercourse is left to be regulated by their owners. The regulations of law. So think about this. From one plantation to the next, if one plantation wants to set up and have gang rape every day, every night, if they also want to engage in taking the children of their the enslaved people, the enslaved adults that they have there, and they want to sodomize young boys, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, they want to gang rape young girls, 6, 7, 8. They are in charge of the law around intimacies. So it's left up to each plantation owner. So think about how vile, how pathological this is. And so they go on to say the regulations of law as to the white race, again, this idea of whiteness, on the subject of sexual intercourse do not and cannot for obvious reasons apply to slaves. Their intercourse is promiscuous, and the violation of a female slave by a male slave would be a mere assault and battery. So I have several more examples that I outline in my book. Actually, there are a myriad of examples, and I want you to get the book, so I don't want to give too much away. But white psychopathology is defined as, I define it as a complex civilization-level disorder created and perpetuated through centuries of moral anesthesia, cognitive distortion, and emotional detachment. It fuses the traits of psychopathy, absence of empathy, sociopathy, moral disconnection from communal reality, and malignant narcissism, pathological self-exaltation. White psychopathology manifests as a collective personality disorder disguised as normalcy. It compels white individuals and systems to pathologize others in order to conceal their own psychic fragmentation. Its expressions include racial violence, scientific racism, cultural theft, and moral inversion of calling domination democracy. This pathology is both personal and institutional. The private delusion of superiority becomes the public policy of civilization. Whiteness therefore operates as a socially transmitted disorder, one that converts violence into virtue and moral psychosis into institutional standard. And then lastly, collective diabolical antisocial personality disorder. This is a collective and individual psychopathology characterized by chronic moral inversion, pathological lying, emotional anesthesia, and the compulsion to dominate, exploit, and dehumanize others, particularly Black and Indigenous peoples, for psychological equilibrium. It represents the most evolved and destructive strain of antisocial behavior in human history, fusing psychopathy, sociopathy, and malignant narcissism into a single cultural and institutional disorder. Some of the core traits, so CAAPD manifests when domination, not empathy, becomes the organizing principle of identity, government, and economy. Core traits: pathological entitlement, a delusional conviction of divine or racial superiority, the belief that one's group is inherently authorized to rule, possess, or punish others. 2, moral inversion, the capacity to rename violence as virtue, colonization as civilization, enslavement as enterprise, segregation as order, genocide as salvation. 3, instrumental affect, selective empathy deployed only when it reinforces control or absolves guilt, emotional detachment from the suffering of racialized others. 4, predatory dependency, a parasitic relationship to Black creativity, labor, and suffering, requiring subjugation to maintain psychic stability. 5, collective projection, chronic psychological displacement of one's own deviance, lust, and violence onto the oppressed, producing myths of the Black rapist, the dangerous immigrant, or the ungrateful poor. 6, institutional codification, the translation of private pathology into law, policy, and theology, ensuring that personal illness becomes state behavior. So I am going to put you all into groups. And what I'd like to do is just have you just discuss for a very brief period, maybe 5 minutes or so. What's your one takeaway from attending this overview webinar of this book? Here we go. Dr. Smith, are you on? Dr. William A. Smith?
I'm on. I just had to take a phone call. I'm sorry.
Are you my racial battle fatigue friend?
I am.
Well, I am such a fan of your work. I quote your work. I have just referred and relied on it. I referred to it and relied on it for some years. Thank you so much for your powerful work.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I was listening to my daughter called me and distracted me.
Not a problem. Not a problem. I'm so glad that you are able to be here.
Oh, thank you. So I'm gonna hang out. How long is it going to continue to go?
Just another 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, so I'm gonna hang out right here, and then I'll finish with my daughter and be back listening to you.
Okay.
All right. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, Artemis.
Oh, Dante.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning here, so you must know I love you.
You're in South Africa?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Dante. It's Sabrina. I'm on my wife Mario's tablet.
Hey, you.
Hi.
It's so good to see you. We'll hear your voice.
Good to hear you too. Well, good to see you.
Thank you, babe.
You're welcome.
Okay. I was just talking. There was only one person in my breakout room.
Yeah,
Dante.
a few people didn't go. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
She was
as
asking me if
people
I
are
had a chance to meet Dr. Wellesley, but I was saying no. I was a student, but not. And my cousin was a student at the time. So, but
Gotcha.
I've met Dr. Wellesley years and years ago. So yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
So why don't we have maybe, 2 or 3 people? Well, why don't we do this? I want to have you write in the chat your one takeaway from this overview tonight. And then I'm also, if any of you have connects to the Breakfast Club, because I really want to go on some major Black outlets to share and present on this work, because I hear a lot of commentaries, and not that people, well, I'll say this, I hear a lot of commentaries that are very limited in the analysis, and mostly because most people, in my experience, just have a limited grasp on history and haven't done like a very thorough analysis of factual, a chronological factual framework, I guess, of sorts. So it just kind of limits the commentary sometimes. So if any of you have connections to like the Breakfast Club or to some other outlets, please let me know. So as you all are writing your one takeaway in the chat, let's hear from a few people. What are your thoughts about what I've presented? Feelings?
I hope it's okay if I speak without putting my hand up. I'm not very good at finding where the hands and everything are. I've been following you for a while, and what you've been doing is actually quite brilliant. It's actually opened my eyes and the eyes of a lot of people. I think now we need to disengage from white people, because it's one thing to say that they've got psychopathology and all these things and to say they're evil, but we want to continue being in their spaces. We want to continue with their Christmas and all. We've had Kwanzaa for a long time. I'm in Nigeria. I've got Igbo heritage, but I'm Black British. But I'm in Nigeria right now. I'm a retired London police officer. And I've seen a lot in my life because I was mostly in England and 10 years in France. But we have to disengage. If we don't disengage, white people will think that they are our saviors and they'll think they're wonderful. And the last thing I'll say, because I know others want to speak, in Nigeria, we've been colonized, and all of core Africa, all of Black Africa, and the church with there's a man called Frederick Lugard. He's the one who amalgamated Nigeria. And they had this plan, the fetish of white prestige. It's in their report. And they used the church to make white people, and Arabs, if you're Muslim, but to make white people to be like godly and wonderful.
Yeah.
The exact opposite of what they are. And the churches have done a lot. And the last thing I'll say is, if people want to believe in the Bible like I do, the Messiah is actually Black. He's Black. Yeah. So we need to go to the truth. We've got some Israelites in Africa and, Black Israelites, perhaps to look at their teaching, but just to disengage from these people. Thank you very much. I'll mute my mic.
No, thank you so much, Ndidi. And I appreciate all just of the encouragement I've received from you over the years, because we're connected on X. And you reposted my work, you've sent me messages, and I just appreciate the way that you really understood and aligned, with my analysis and the things that I'm trying to say. And similarly to Dr. E. Franklin Frazier, who I mentioned earlier, one of my thoughts became one of the very foundational questions of my work became, so is Black people's interrogation of or are our criticism and is our critique of white supremacy really about its vileness and its evilness, or is it that we're just excluded from it? And so you hit on something very powerful in what you said, because for as much as we can be critical, there are, and it's been proven when you look at the token class of Black people, which I myself was a part of at one time, you begin to align yourself by all of the norms, the structures, everything, and you feel good about it. And you define yourself by it, and then you look down on people who have not achieved through these structures, who have not measured up to the standards, the norms, the measures, et cetera. So I really appreciate you uplifting that here in this space. Who else? I think we have time to hear from maybe two more people.
Dante, I know I spoke. I'm going to be really brief.
Okay.
The clip that you showed of Dr. Welsing is circulating on social media, and there is a huge debate going on. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with Dr. Tommy J. Curry and the two Needies, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, to her point, disengaging, because the dialogue that was going on under the clip of that post had more to do with Black people defending Howard University, a historically Black college. My experience is that they always talk about they are the Harvard of HBCUs, right, which to me is diabolical in itself. How the hell do you say you're an HBCU, but you consistently compare yourself to a PWI?
That you were excluded from, which is the reason that HBCU had to be created. It reinforces white supremacy. It reinforces anti-Blackness. You're absolutely right. I agree with you. So when we're talking about whiteness or white psychopathology, we are talking about a mindset, a psychology that has been infused into not only European people, but its subjects, those that it has colonized.
And menticide is going to take us out. It is going to take Black people out, and I need Black people to understand that.
Thank you so much. And I talk about that in my second book and in this book as well. Artemis.
What struck me with tonight's talk, only because all your slides had this fundamental patriarchal male dominance theme about it, and I'm just wondering, did it not start there with men possessed this natural authority over all the political, intellectual, and moral life, which then became the sort of unquestioned position from which all these racial categories would be created? So the white male is the universal knower, the rational arbiter. I mean, something different just struck me about all this male dominance and patriarchy having created all of this. And so I don't really have the words for it, because it's just come to me and I haven't had time to sort of think around it. But I just want to make that comment, that not in defense of white women, of course, because they're fucking racist too, but just that.
Oh, you said the white women?
Yeah. So that I don't exclude them, but I just noticed that it's this patriarchy that really created this,
Yeah, but I do want to say, though, when we think about the white women that were plantation owners that also held up white patriarchy and are a part of the white collective patriarchal body politic, white supremacy was not just the architecture of white maleness, but also white femaleness. When we look at, for example, someone like Donald Trump, he was raised in a household by two parents that upheld and reinforced his vileness, what became him. And there are millions of Donald Trumps throughout this world and definitely here within our culture that are in support of that type of behavior. And so when you look at, for example, the political group White Women for Trump, right? That they have always been central to white male patriarchy. And I think that that's something that gets missed because they're right there aligned with it, in support of it, and so on and so forth. So there are ways too, and I want to talk about the ways that white supremacy and white psychopathology function in European people, which is somewhat different than how it functions in oppressed groups. There are some similarities, but there are also differences. But to your point, it is pathological self-aggrandizement at its extreme, at its most extreme. Okay, one more person, and then I think we're out of here. Celia McIntosh.
Hi, I'll be real quick. I missed the video and everything, but just some things that I've gained from the conversation. I heard this quote this week that talked about how when they talked about Pam Bondi, they said you have been protected by the privilege, but you really don't have access to it. So that just stood out to what you just said. You're in alignment with it. You're side by side by it, but still you're not fully in access of it. And the other thing that you guys brought up was disengagement. And for me, what I found out about that disengagement is that it creates more rage. So I don't know what your thoughts about that is. But that's one of the things that I've noticed when you do try, even in a workspace where you try to disengage because you are being othered anyway, and you disengage from even going on around with the politics, then the anger increases.
Yeah, there's no way to fully disengage with it because you've got to participate for your survival. But on your own personal time, you do have to work to disengage with it psychologically, psycho-emotionally, and psycho-spiritually so that you don't continue to define yourself by it. You see the game for the game, that it's all a ruse, and that you're only doing it because you have to survive. That is it. Please, please, please mark your calendars on February 24th to go out on to Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and to purchase the book. The hard copy and the paperback will be available on February 24th. And I want everyone to purchase the book if you can on that day. And if you can afford to purchase multiple copies for friends and family, I want you to do that as well. And if you are white, please use your privilege and purchase 10, 20, 30 books and hand them out to Black people that you know. Please, okay? As part of our reparations project that we have going on for Black academics. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. Any last thoughts before I disconnect, before we disconnect?
Thank you so much, Dante. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you for giving us the words to express what is necessary at this time. Thank you, Dante. Love you.
Love you
definitely.
too.
Thank you for the words.
My voice is not
Love you, Dante.
Love you too. Oh,
thank you. I came late, but thank you.
Thank you again, Dante.
And if you write I'll give you an address, marcel@danteking.com. The first 3 people that write about what diagnosing whiteness and anti-Blackness was all about, how it touched you, just one paragraph maybe, or 2, you will receive a free copy. Just email your mailing address as well, your name and your mailing address. So if you read Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness, that qualifies you potentially to get a free copy of this book. Okay, so the first 3 people, all right? Anyone else?
Will there, Brother Dante, will there be a replay of this webinar?
There will be.
Okay. And you'll send that out to us?
Well, it's going to be posted across, or streamed rather, across all of my pages.
Oh, Brother Dante.
Okay. All righty. Peace.
Take care.
You too.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Bye, Dante.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
No, Rochelle.
What do you mean no?
Thoughts?
So many thoughts.
Want to call me?
I will call you tomorrow.
Okay.
Because we're off tomorrow. Rick, did you give away?
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. a lot.
All right. All right.
Uh,
All right. Talk to you soon, baby. Love you.
Okay. Love you too.
Dante,
Yes.
on Friday when I got home, I mean, I was pretty much enraged all Friday evening. There was a comment on NPR I was listening to, Ken, what's his name? The jazz player, Ken Poblonsky passed away. He made it, he before he died, he had an interview, and he said that they started the NPR interview with Ken Poblonsky was arguably possibly one of the greatest jazz musicians to ever live. I lost my shit. I just, we're being erased, Dante, and that is what's most frightening.
No, we're not. I mean,
not erased. That's a strong word. No, we're not being erased, but they're trying. They're trying.
I think if you give any stock to that,
yeah,
I
don't.
I can see how you might assume that perspective,
Correct.
but that is a statement that's not a statement of fact. Again, being made by someone on either their own platform or someone that invited them on, and it has no value.
It has no value. That's what I was so angry about. It has no value. And, I was talking to my neighbor who also was here today, musicologist. She's Cuban. And, we were just talking about the history of jazz and so forth and so on. And I just, I don't know, it just angered me.
So to Dinesia's point, though, you cannot give any psychic room.
Right. Any psychic room.
Cognitive distortion.
I agree. And I, that's what I tell my clients, when they're going through things, it's like, please don't give it that brain space, because then you're not allowing the good to come in. And so, I thank you, Dante. I really appreciate it. Was a wonderful Sunday.
I'm glad that you were here. Thank you.
Yes. Take care. Okay.
Okay.
See you in a couple of weeks, I guess. Yes.
Or I think this week.
This week? Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you all. Have a great night. Please tell Brittany I said hello.
I definitely will. I see her tomorrow. She is making oxtails, so I am in the building.
Okay.
Thanks, Dante.
For sure.
And you and I still have a lunch date to put together. So text me and let me know when you're available.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Artemis, for joining all the way from South Africa, too.
Thank you so much.
For sure. And Dr. Smith, thank you for being here. I'm so appreciative of you making time and space for this.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. All right. Take care, everyone.